everyone, welcome back to another video of LeetCode Daily Challenge Streak series, and in today's video we have a new question that says implement queue using two stacks. Okay, so given a queue, okay, you'll be having a queue. So you're supposed to implement the operations that are performed on a queue with the help of two stacks. Now let's understand what a queue is. We all know that a queue is something first in first out. Okay, so when you push an element here, so if it's 1 and then 2 and then 3 and 4, okay, now this is called the front end and this is called the rear end. Okay, now when you're pushing element, you push like this, so it goes like this. So when you're trying to push 1, it goes here and 1 is appended, and then 2 and then 3 and then 4. So imagine you're at a movie ticket counter and this is a queue and this is a counter, and the first person goes in, he collects the ticket and then he goes out. Now the second person is standing behind the first person before he left, and then the third person, and so on and so forth. So who gets the ticket first? The man who was standing in the queue first gets the ticket and then goes out, then the second person, then the third person. Okay, now we are supposed to implement this queue with the help of two stacks. Now in the question we are asked that we are supposed to implement these 4 functions which say push, pop, peek and empty. Now let's talk about each of these functions. What does push mean? Push mean nothing but you're appending the element into this particular queue. Okay, you're queuing that element, so you're adding that element. What does pop mean? Pop means you're removing that element. Okay, now what does peek mean? Imagine you have a queue like this 1, 2, 3 and 4. You're supposed to return the element that is on the top, which is on the front. Okay, but without removing it, without removing this element, you're just supposed to return what is present on the top. Okay, that's called as peek. So peek operation for this queue would be 1. It will return 1. Now empty function, it's just that you're supposed to return whether or not the queue is empty at a given point of time. So when the input asks for empty, then you're supposed to check whether the given queue is empty or not. Now how do we solve this problem? So it's like if you have elements 1, 2, 3 and 4 and you want to push them into a queue. Okay, you want to push them into a queue, and say you've already pushed 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so since queue is like first in first out, you make sure that your elements are like this, looking like this. Now you want to add this 4th element to the queue. Okay, you want to add this 4th element to the queue. Now what will you do? You can't like directly add this into this with the help of stack operations. So what you do is that you will remove every element from stack 1, like pop each element and then append it to the stack 2. Okay, so here goes 1, then 2 and then 3. Okay, now so you've popped all the elements. Now what you're doing now, you're adding this 4th element here. Okay, now you added 4th element here, then again you pop it back from S2 and then you add it here, then you again remove it from here and then you add it here, then you remove it from here, then you add it here. So this is how pushing works. And for popping, now you have the elements 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now since popping is just simply popping the first element in there, because queue is like first in first out, so you will just remove the first element here. So whenever you're pushing an element into this, you just have to make sure if your stack is empty, as in if your stack 1 is empty, you directly append it. Okay, you directly append it. But now you're appending 2, you want to append 2, but here the stack is not empty. So what you do, you take this element out, then you push it into this stack 2, 1, you add this element into this, okay, 2. Now you pop this element from here and then you add it here, because you want to make sure you maintain your order. Otherwise this will be framed in reverse. Otherwise it will look like 1, 2, 3 and 4, and every time you want to pop an element, you have to shift all these elements and then get these. Now, if you want to perform the peek operation, you're simply returning whichever thing is on the front. Like I said, queue is like this, and this is the front end, and this is the rear end. You will return whichever thing is on the front end. Now, if you, with respect to the stack, you can see that whichever element is first, it is on the top. Since it is on the top, you will return the stack of top element. You will return the top element. Okay. Now, the last operation is empty. For empty operation, you just check if your stack 1 is empty or not at any given point of time. If, for example, you are at input and it asks to check if the stack is empty. Now, you will check if your S1 is empty. If it is empty, you will return true. Otherwise, you will return false. Now, let's quickly code this up. We have this initialization function given where we'll initialize our two stacks. Self.s1 is equal to one stack and self.s2 is equal to another empty stack. Now you can see that the push function is given. Whenever the push function is given, you check first if the stack 1 is empty. If the stack 1 is empty, you directly append the element. If the stack 1 is not empty, what are you doing? You are just moving all the elements of s1 into s2, then adding the element into s1 and then getting the elements back from s2. So while self.s1, as in while the elements in s1 still exist, we are moving them to s2. Okay, self.s2.append. What are we appending? Whatever is on the top of the element, we are popping it and then appending it here. Okay, so self.s1.pop. It directly gives us the top element that is present. Now, after popping, what are we doing? After popping all the elements, we are appending this particular element in S1. Okay, we are appending this particular X element in S1. Now, what are we doing after this step? Now, since we have moved all the elements to S2, we are supposed to bring them back after appending this element in stack 1. We are moving all the elements back into our original stack. So, while self.s2, as in while elements exist in s2, we are bringing them back to the stack 1. So self.s1.append self.s2.pop. Okay, so whichever element is on the top, we are bringing that back here. Okay, now pop function. What are we doing here? We are just popping the element that is on the top. Okay, so return self.s1.pop. Okay, we are just returning the element that is on the top. Since the Python has a direct function of removing and deleting the element, it will be done here. What are we doing in peek? In peek, we are just returning the element that is on the top. We are not deleting anything. We are just returning self.s1 of -1. We are returning the element that is on the top. And for empty function, what are we doing? We are just returning if s1 is empty or not. So if we will be returning not self.s1, as in if all the elements in s1 are empty, and if it's done and there exists nothing called s1, then we'll be returning empty as true. Otherwise, it will return false automatically. Let's quickly run the code. It's accepted, and let's just submit it. This works. Thank you, guys.